states have higher crime rates than blue states, and rural areas have higher crime rates than urban areas.
Right? So if you have, and I tell people, listen, I know emotions win over logic every day. That's why I try to give you a personal story where I can, because I know that people will remember Mr. Hastings.
Yeah, they will relate to it a lot easier.
But they will not remember the conversation that we're having about crime rates, right? So I'm trying to balance that, because I know how we operate as human beings. But we have to, at some point, bring some logic to the emotion as well, because otherwise we're just not a thinking system.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that almost emotional or spiritual need for the public to see the victim made whole somehow by punishing the offender, where that may not actually be good for society, as you would argue, right?
Well, and here's and I'm so glad that you talk about victims, because we've actually put a ton of work on victims, right? So we hired 16 additional victim services representatives since I've been in the office. We created a victims advisory board that is composed of former victims of violent crime and family members of victims of violent crime to inform our practice. The survey after survey, including one that was done in LA County in 2020, 60% of the victims of violent crime said they believe that their offenders should be given an opportunity to rehabilitate. They believe in redemption, but they also were very critical of my office and said, our trauma was never dealt with, right? We were traumatized, and we were allowed to stay traumatized. The only thing that the prosecutor wanted to do was use my testimony to make sure that I could help with the prosecution.
That's fascinating, and I'd like to dig into that, because it goes to an inherent limitation in the justice system as it is fashioned now. The DA's office has the power to determine what happens with the offender or the supposed criminal, but it doesn't have a lot of power to restore or make whole the victim in the case. That seems to be dealt with by other avenues. Do you talk about what power you have and that board has to help the victims of supposed crimes?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, it's mixed, right? You're absolutely right to a great extent, but it's nuanced in the sense that under state law in California, the district attorney has a victim services component, right? And there's a state compensation board that provides compensation for victims of violent crime, assuming that they have the financial needs in order to deal with their trauma, deal with moving expenses, burial costs for the family. It's very onerous, but nevertheless it's there. What we're doing is, rather than traditionally our victim services being, okay, here's the website to go get apply for compensation. Here's how you can complete all these forms. And by the way, your next court date is going to be, April 20th, and we like to be there at 8:30 in the morning so you can testify. Right, that was a component.